Hello and welcome to the Animatricks Festival 2021. I'm Hamid Shajari, I'm the Artistic Director, and welcome to our last of our master classes this year, which is Katariina Lillqvist and her masterclass entitled Documentary Animation. We are very happy to have Katariina Lillqvist with us, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Katariina, and he can talk about her career and her wonderful animations. Thank you, Katariina, for coming, and welcome. Please begin.
Hello, I'm extremely happy today. I just received the prize for my film, The Last Matador. So once more, thank you, Animatricks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You deserve it. It's a wonderful film.
And I decided to have this masterclass dedicated to my philosophy of the documentary animation, because that's how I came into the film world. I was a documentary film editor in Vaiale in Finnish Broadcasting Company in the 80s. I was a young filmmaker, and just after my film school, I got a job. I was working for the documentary department of Finnish TV Channel 2 in Tampere, and I was mostly editing black and white documentaries. I loved my work. I loved the film as a material. And unfortunately, after a couple of years, the Finnish television decided to close down the film department. It was a disaster. Those days, video was still, let's say, it was still developing, and the editing facilities for film, I was used to use my old editing table, my old Steenbeck table, holding the film in my hands and cutting it, and it was the real montage, the feeling. And then when they told to the younger editors that, okay, you can go to the sports department to edit the ice hockey matches, I said, oh my God, I'm going to quit. Goodbye TV, I'm going to study something more. I want to stay with the film. I want to still hold the real film in my hands. And as I had always observed the Eastern European animation, thanks to the Tampere Film Festival, I extremely loved the stop motion tradition of those days, Czechoslovakia. So I was so angry. I took the old catalog of Tampere Film Festival. I took the address of Kratky Film Prague. I escaped to Prague, and I was knocking the door of the headquarters of the short film department of Prague. And I asked, how can I get stop motion education in Czechoslovakia? Those days, my question was very radical because it was still before the Berlin Wall. It was in the 80s, so I was coming from the West, but Finland had a very interesting position in the political map of the world. We were something in between East and West. So they took my question seriously, they checked my background, and they asked, why you have been studying the film in Finland, and why do you like animation? And they were very happy to hear that I have been seeing so many Czechoslovakian animations. And then they said, maybe you can apply, but go back to Finland now and send your papers. And the paper process took a year and a half. And meanwhile, my first son, he was born. So finally I got the answer, but I also had the baby. So we moved to Prague as a whole young family with the pram.
Wonderful. Can you tell us the years, like what were the years that you were working as an editor in Tampere, and then when did you move to Prague?
I moved to Prague in 1989, just before the revolution, and it was the mid-80s. I was working as a younger editor, and so we arrived to Prague just before the big Velvet Revolution. So I still saw the classic socialistic educational model. And I got my stipendium. I was like an exchange student. I was first I was studying inside the theater school, the Damu of Prague. Officially, I was studying puppet theater because it was the only way to reach the puppet animation. It was not through the classic film school, the FAMU of Prague, but through the theater academy. And that was very interesting because I was also taking courses on scenography, which I'm extremely thankful today, because I was very happy today when I heard the reasons for my award, that the nice thanks for the scenography and so, but I'm able to do my own scenography thanks to the courses I took during my early years in the theater academy. And later I was working with the big groups inside the Jiritrenka studio. I was working with many scenographers, and the biggest group that I had, it was something like 20 people. But nowadays we are also working with very small independent teams, like Matador we did with 3 people. So everybody were doing everything. So I like to use hammer and nails. I like to arrange the sets. So more and more, I like to do the scenographical parts of the films also. But my education in Prague was very wide. We were studying the theory of puppet animation, puppet theater in the beginning.
So they were marionettes? Were they marionettes,
yes,
like the
yes.
puppets you were doing? Yes. Okay.
Yes. And I found out that this political history of the puppets is extremely interesting and long. The political satire is as old as puppet theater. So I have been borrowing many theories from the old school puppet theaters. For example, the historical puppet theaters, even during the medieval times in Czech lands, they had already political puppet theater. They had this Husite wars, and radical political student groups from Prague University were doing political performances with puppets. They were building a huge pope, which was having a kind of very untraditional costumes. It was made from paper, and they were carrying this huge pope around Prague, singing revolutionary songs, and everybody of them got hanged. They killed 20 students because of that. And so during the years, the puppet theater was playing a key role in the Czech society. When it was not possible to use Czech language in the official theaters, the puppet actors were using Czech language when they were playing puppet plays. And this was very typical, not only to Czech lands, but to many countries. For example, the shadow theater of Greek and Turkey, these famous, nice, old characters like Karagas, they are always making fun of the kings and the sultans and the rich people. So this somehow I feel that puppet is like an alter ego. It's like a jester, that puppet can say many things about the politicians, about the rulers. Puppets have something very anarchistic in their nature. And so combining this political satire and also the documentary elements, it's maybe very characteristic to many of my animations. I'm going to speak about 3 animations that are linked to my hometown of Tampere. I'm going to speak about 3 films that all of them, they have roots in reality. And the first film was called The Maiden and the Soldier. I made that in 1993 already in Trnka studio in Prague. Then I had this Far Away from Ural. I made that in Hafan Film Studio in 2008. And then this Radio Dolores that I made already in the Mikulanska studio. It was made in 2016. And all of these films, they are linked to the history of Tampere. And to start with, The Maiden and the Soldier, I was a very young filmmaker. I just moved to Prague. Velvet Revolution was going on. And at the same time, I was finding my own voice. I was already writing a story that happened to my grandmother. It was a story about the Finnish Civil War, 1918. We had one of the biggest battles of the Civil War in Tampere, and my grandmother was very young, and she was looking for her brother. She found him. Unfortunately, he was dead already. So that story was so heavily in my mind, so I created my first real puppet story on the ground of my grandmother's stories. But I was so young and shy, so I wanted to make it to look more like a bit like a fairy tale or a folk legend. It was also this kind of, how can I say, now when I'm older, I'm looking back to the situation. I was a young student from Western Bloc. The Berlin Wall had just been falling down, and the Czech society was very fastly moving from the socialistic regime to the wild capitalism. And at the same time, I was describing a Finnish civil war, a war that many Czechs had never heard about. And it was a class war. It was a very strong, let's say, the Reds against white troops, the socialists against the rich people. And it hit hard Tampere because we were an industrial town and a proletarian town. So I was describing this kind of things that maybe they were not so easy to describe those days in Czech. So I think I was choosing this fairy tale style, this more romantic style, kind of a universal style. It was like a Grimm's fairy tale about a girl who is searching for her lover from the flames of war. I was writing the story to be more like a story of love and story of reunion. It had a happy end, on the contrary than my grandmother's story. But the documentary world was still there. For example, in the scenography of the film, I was using the Tampere factories, the real brick red factories of Tampere. They were on the horizon already. And even when the other sets, they were more like, let's say, kind of unknown, like a Central European landscapes during maybe the First World War, kind of a universal wartime pictures. But there behind, I had the Tampere factories. And so the years were passing by, and I started to make the second part of my Tampere trilogy, The Far Away from Ural. I made that on 2007 and 8, and I was older. I was maybe more bold, and the times had been changing. So that time I was speaking more openly about the real things. It was a real, let's say, a documentary animation based on the old songs, on the old interviews, on the old stories of Pispala, a district of Tampere, where that story came from. And first I made a radio play I made a radio play together with writer Hannu Salama. He's now over 80. And it was very fruitful to work with him because he was remembering the things that I was not remembering. And my grandmother and his father and mother, they had been working together in Pispala. And so we were combining the family histories also. And first we made the script for a documentary radio play, a 1 hour radio feature. And nobody got offended, even when the play was very, how can I say, radical. The content was very radical, but it was very well received when nobody said anything. But then when I made the animated version of the same story, and it was describing our first president Mannerheim in a bit different way, I was even showing his corset. And I always remember when I came back from Prague, the film had the premiere during the Tampere Film Festival. And I came back from Prague. So in the airport, I had this huge, the first thing, the Ilta-Sanomat, our local evening newspaper, had a huge poster. Mannerheim is wearing corset in the film. And they had this one still picture from the film totally out of the context. They were just showing this very picture where Mannerheim is wearing this velvet corset. And I thought, that's interesting. A puppet film is entering into the big headlines. And then
Wow,
I found...
that's how you make tabloids in Finland, I suppose. Like, yeah, because Mannerheim otherwise always in the uniform on all the statues. Yes. And then suddenly this was so shocking that it had to be everywhere in the evening newspapers.
Yes. And then I heard that there is a parliamentary discussion if this film can be visible in the Finnish television. They were voting about the yes or no. And then inside the Finnish television, they also had to vote. Okay, but the liberals won, and the film got the record of the Finnish animation viewers. We got almost 500,000 Finns were looking at the film. So I think that this Ilta-Sanomat did perfect job by showing this still picture, and also the parliamentary discussion was adding the heat. I was really looking at what the hell is going on. And finally, I ended up in a TV discussion against a general and a priest. I had my puppet with me, and my puppets are this big. They are 25 centimeters tall. So I was having my little Mannerheim puppet, and the general and the priest, they were shouting. It was really interesting to look at the emotions, how the small puppets can create such a big...
Wow, that just says like how boring the life over here might be, that you get a parliament and everything in ruins by like one puppet and a corset. So just tells you something. And who says in Finland there isn't censorship? So there you go, like they were trying to censor it, and then they had to take a parliamentary vote for not censoring it. Should we censor or not censor? Will this destroy our country or not?
Nobody in Prague believed me.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that either. So it was like a national emergency suddenly. Which year was it? 2000 and something, right?
2008.
Wow.
And there is still a very funny discussion. It's in the archive of Finnish TV. I can write you the link. It's this Elävä arkisto. Just a moment, I will write it.
The living archives, yes.
Living archive. And it's a talk. You can still see this discussion. It's under the name Uralin Perhonen.
Oh yeah, so there's a video discussion. So that
yes, it's worth to look. You will. It's very interesting. So, and so in that film, I was I was combining old footage, old pictures of Tampere after the Civil War, and the story was very sad and
hello, your image. Okay, my Zoom crashed. Sorry. Okay, now it's. Is it recording? Okay, the Zoom crashed, but continue. Now it's recording again. My Zoom crashed, but it looks like it's. Can you hear me?
yes, now it's perfect.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, go for it. Yes.
So the story behind the Far Away from Ural, it was very sad love story, and it was a story of this young Kyrgyzstan man who was lost in the Battle of Tampere. And we still don't know exactly if he killed himself, if he was killed, or if he just died because of tuberculosis. I have heard 3 versions, but the truth, the only truth that we can find, it is the truth that he left a very long memory in the memory of Pispala district, because we had so many stories left about him. And
So was he fighting in the Finnish Civil War, this Kyrgyzstan man, or where was he
in the
fighting?
Civil War, yes,
Okay, yeah.
1918. So I was already describing Tampere in a very documentary way. We were really using the old photos, and we were building the hill of Pispala according to the old photos. We had many houses that are even still existing today, like the Pispala sauna, the Rajaportin sauna. We were building it 1-to-1, and even this Haulitorni, the tower of Pispala, was there, and the city hall of Tampere. So it was very documentary. And as it was a very low budget film, I was using the photos in that way. For example, when we were building the city hall, we had an old photo. We were making a big print. We were cutting it. We were gluing it into cardboard. We were coloring it. And it was like a 2-dimensional coulis. And that's how we were working. In the Pispala Hill, we were building some of the front houses in 3D. And then the second rows of the houses we were building in 2D with the old photos. It was very effective and very cheap way to create this kind of realistic landscapes and quarters.
I'm going to ask about this Pispala model, because now if you go to one of the museums in Tampere, they have a small model of Pispala. Was this in any way related to your film, or did they build it at the same time as a different model?
No, actually, I haven't even seen this model. It may be newer. When you saw it?
More than 5 years ago.
Okay.
But it's the one in the, it's the one, I can't remember the name of the museum, but it's one of the one in Siberia. It's one of the Tampere local museums. It had these miniature models of.
I know, it's the
Pispala.
Verstas. It's the working.
Verstas, yes, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. No, you are right. I have seen that model. Yes, yes. But
but it's not the same one. Okay, so
no,
you built a
no,
separate one in 2008.
No.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, I started to work with these 2D prints already earlier when I was making the Kafka trilogy, my first independent films in the 90s in Prague. And those days, it was very unusual to use photographs like a collage. And I found out that it was like something that I liked very much. And in the beginning, my older colleagues in the Trenka studio, they were very surprised. I was working together with a Finnish scenographer, my friend Minna Soukka. She was an architect, and she shared my passion of these old photographical details. So we were collecting old photos of old Prague houses, and we started to use the photos as a material of a scenography. And that was very avant-garde those days. And I have been using this style quite often after the first experimental films.
Was this Kafka trilogy the first work that you started to do in Prague? Like, did you start with those and then move to Tampere history, or which one came first?
Yes, the Kafka films, they were the beginning.
Okay. Okay, yeah, because I only have the list in here in Finnish. So the Kafka trilogy, are they in Finnish? Mari Hiilihangolla ratsastaja and Kamari Haikara, or not?
Mari, it was like an experimental film that I made with the 16mm camera, old Bolex, still back in the Tampere TV channel 2 in Tampere television. But the Kafka trilogy and The Maiden and the Soldier, they were my first films in the big Trenka studio in Prague.
Yeah, and it exists. And about Trenka study, I should ask, because I asked somebody in Prague a few years ago about this Trenka, because I was in a bookstore where they had the Trenka illustration, and I said, doesn't the Trenka house exist anymore? And it was an old man who replied, and spoke very good English actually, and said that no, they wanted to build a metro station there. So they have destroyed it. Is this true? Like, did they have the studios there, or was that a different place then? Was that just a
Trenka
house?
studio was existing in 3 places, and finally they moved into the Prague Hollywood, into the hill of Barandov, a little bit in the outskirts of Prague in a hill, and that was the end of the Trenka studio. It later collapsed in the 90s. So that was the last premises of the Trenka studios. They were in the Barandov Hill, but also.
And that's where you worked in the I've been to Barandov studios on the Barandov. So that's where you worked, in the Barandov Hills.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And the older studios, one was under the Nusle Bridge. And I think that the old man was maybe mentioning that because it was under a metro station. But the house is still existing. They put the metro in a bridge over the house.
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, okay. So yeah, but it was in 3 locations. So interesting. Like, yeah, only Barandov exists, but it's just with the name of Barandov nowadays. It doesn't have the Trenka. Yeah. And also Kratky film was there, and then Kratky film doesn't exist either. I think they're all in Barandov, if there is anything similar.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
But yeah, it's a huge place. I have been actually to Barandov Studios 2 years ago, and we went to see some of them. They were making this new Czech film, which is now finished, and they're waiting for the premiere. It's something like Mice Go to Heaven or something like that.
It was a huge co-production. Even Poland was involved. So many of my friends and colleagues were cooperating with that project.
So I'm glad, yes, you know that. So that's nowadays I think they all kind of moved to Barandov because that's the only place that they have a lot of space. And there were many projects going on in there. It was wonderful. There was also, they were shooting a Christmas film for Netflix, which actually had some of the scenes were shot in northern Finland. And it was something Christmas. It was some Christmas movie with English actors. I forgot the name of it. It's coming out, I think, the end of this year or something, but they're already shooting it. I think it got delayed because of Corona. But it was they had built the stages over there, and then there were some animators building some of the stage puppets and other kind of decorations that they were using in the film. And it looked absolutely amazing carpentry. They had fake snow. We went there in the summer with Kaspar Jansis. Kaspar got invited and we got invited there with Kaspar to go there because we knew one of the people over there, and we saw this amazing set. I mean, the skill of these carpenters and craftsmen there is absolutely amazing. They had built this kind of elf village out of wood, and then there was fake snow over it. They were gladly we got there just before, like a day before they were going to start shooting there. So it looked absolutely amazing. We weren't allowed to take pictures because of copyright reasons, but it was absolutely stunning. There was an animator, our friend is this Lenka, who's an animator, and then she was making these miniature models and other props for the interior of the cottages of this film. And that's how we got to go to Barrandov studio. We saw this stage. It was absolutely stunning. Like everything was made. They had all these huts, they were wooden, they had interior, exterior, everything was made with perfect detail. And then in the next stage, studio stage there, they were working on this Mice Go to Heaven or something like that. The name, and we also saw the sets over there, and they had I think 5 or 6 sets, which they were animating at the time in 2019 summer. And yeah, I think it's finished, but they're just waiting for the premiere. I think it's the premiere got moved for about a year. I think it was supposed to come out before Christmas last year, and it's going to come out this fall, I think. Hopefully,
it was very touching. Now, when I was finishing my Last Matador, the post-production was again done in Barrandov. A private company called Signator Post. They are now working inside the same building that I started my career with the Kafka trilogy. So the young independent companies are now renting the Barrandov premises. And I was laughing so much because I was walking again through the same corridors than I did when I was a young student. So it's 30 years and the circle is going like this. Those days I was the youngest one in the team. Now as an older filmmaker, I'm going back to Barrandov, and I found many new companies there. But it's a fantastic feeling that the life has gone back to Barrandov, because during the 90s and after the millennium, the film crisis was so deep in Czech land that we were afraid that the whole Barrandov studio will be one day like a hotel complex or whatever. But I think that it will go on.
Yeah, it looks, there's so many activities going on in there, and I'm glad that I think it helps that it's a little bit out of the main town, so it's maybe about 5-6 kilometers from the city old center of Prague. So they've it seemed to me that they've kind of left it alone.
Yes.
That it had some like undeveloped space or some like dilapidated buildings as well. So it looked like for now it was like that, and they are doing a lot of shoots. They're constantly shooting. I think that's how they also got the business going, that they also are shooting international live action productions there. And I'm glad that they do that, because the skills of these like carpenters and artisans there is absolutely amazing. And I think that's the thing that kind of also started the system there, and they're using it for both animation and live action. So it's wonderful. But tell us that you worked in Czech Republic for many years. Where did you always work in Prague? Were you filming all of your films filming all of your animations in Prague?
Yes, definitely. First, I was working many years in the Barrandov. Then, when the Kratky film was collapsing, we had to move, and it was this film. I have this puppet here. It was the film Xenia from St. Petersburg. It was a historical film about the history of St. Petersburg. It was half an hour animation. It was a legend of Saint Xenia, who was very controversial character. She was an insane woman. She gave all of her riches off. She was walking around the town using a costume of a general. She was cutting her hair. Nowadays we can say that she was a gender blender, but she was a saint. And when we were starting to prepare this film, the Kratky film was already having huge financial troubles, and as Studio Trenka was part of the Kratky film, so we got the rumors that if you are paying the first amount of the laboratory money or anything, it all goes into the bottomless hole of the bankrupt. Don't pay anything, try to escape. And then we had a meeting with my group. We decided that as a group, we will very quickly move into an independent studio. And so we moved, and you can imagine the shock, because you have seen Barrandov, you have seen the scale. And from the hills of Barrandov, we were moving into Prague suburbs, into a garage of a little house, little private house. So we did this film in a garage. We still had our 35mm cameras, and everything that was supposed to be in the big atelier of Barrandov, we had to carry to the garage. But as our group was very flexible, we had excellent cameraman Miloslav Spala and a very good animator Alfons Menstopui. So thanks to my wonderful colleagues, we were able to downsize. We were really able to evacuate this film and to shoot it in a very low space with the really hot big studio lamps. It felt like a sauna. And
when did you when did you move there? What year was it? And did you continue in that same location?
It was 1998. So that was the end of Kratky Film. And so we moved together with a young independent studio called Haffan Film. Jan Baley, if you have seen his works later. And then together with the Haffan Film, we managed to get an old factory, a very shabby old factory, but in the central Prague, in Žižkov area. So we were moving into that factory, and there I already made my Far Away from Ural, plus several other films. But finally, we founded our own little studio in the Mikulanska street. That's the place that I'm still working. And it's an old Baroque house with the wonderful high rooms. So that's a kind of a very meditative place and a house with many ghosts and a long history. So I have been shooting my film Farusa and the demo of Master and Margarita and Radio Dolores Partiali plus the whole Last Matador there. So that's my current location. Wow. And in a way, I would like to speak about that too, because it's a part of my philosophy. Because Mikulanska is also an art residency, so we can live and shoot in the same house. That's very unusual. And I like this kind of intensity that we can really make long days. I can fall asleep when I am overtired. And then during the weekends, I'm still working with the scenographical sets. And I like this hellish working period of half a year. But I'm really involved with this, everything, the sets, the scenography, the filmmaking process. And then I can have 1 month totally off. So I like to live and work together.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us like how is the Mikulanska studio, is it like big enough for many sets? So are you able to build always many sets, and then do you work constantly on can you work on many sets at the same time, or how do you shoot your films in?
No, we are just we are able to prepare one set and have one set in a process. But if we are doing bigger sets, we are borrowing the nearby factory studio in Modrani district. So we are combining 2 studio premises. And so it's perfect for small scale films. But for example, now when I'm preparing a series, I'm going to combine these 2 studio spaces more often.
So is it, would it be can you explain maybe about the reasons why you decide to make your films over there? Is it has something to do with the artisans and craftsmen who are there, or do you just love the place, love Prague so much?
We had a very interesting history with Mikulanska. My husband has been living there whole of his life. And it's an old Jewish house. It's a part of the Jewish history of Prague. I have also been making documentaries of that house. And it's inside the old town, and it's extremely funny because it's surrounded by these modern malls and hotels and whatever, but it's still going on. And now, just by chance, the Prague Film School, the animation school, the Umbrum, is moving to the opposite house. So I very much look forward what's going to happen when all the students and teachers of the animation are moving there to the same street. So we will see how this house will develop in the future. I'm very much waiting something to happen. And actually, I wanted to tell something about my personal history, and it maybe is also connected to this kind of working methods. As I told you that I like to combine my private life and my studio life. And when I was young, I belonged to the first punk generation of Tampere. The punk movement came when I was 15. So, and the early punk, it was not only the music. It was also about making the magazines, doing actions, all kind of occupying houses, and I had my first own flat when I was 16. It was possible those days. I had a very shabby little house. I had a cellar full of punk musicians, and in the upstairs we were making the magazines. So I was very happy in living and working in the same space. And I think that spirit is still a part of my soul. I'm the happiest when I can combine art like a style of life. And
yeah, that's very true. So is it like, so basically were you able to independently keep this place, or were there other like Czech organizations or people who were helping you with this, and are they kind of using this as an artist residence? Or
we have had many students coming there during the years, art exchange students. We have been working together with Finnish Embassy, organizing a kind of events and exhibitions. And for example, now we have also an art exhibition going on in the same house. We were just about to open the exhibition when the corona came. We hope that we are able to open it this autumn. So it's like a multi-space, open to all kind of ideas and exchange plans. And also some of the Finnish film schools, they have been accommodating students there and even making films there. So it's really like this kind of small change.
sounds wonderful. Yeah, sounds like it's like a kind of like an international artist residence, like particularly
Yes,
like maybe Finnish and
in a small scale,
Czech.
but it's very intense.
So is it possible, like for instance, for Finnish animation students to apply and come over there and then work on your, for instance, next project?
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, that's great to hear. And yeah, hopefully after the pandemic, you can like restart again.
Now it has been really hard because everything has been closed, but we look forward. Maybe in August we are able to open it again.
Wonderful. Can you tell us of the films that you've made in Czech Republic? Like, how do you about the crew? Like, how many? Like, how much of the animation do you? Because obviously you write and direct the animations and they're sort of your ideas, based on your ideas. But about the crew, do you animate? How much do you animate yourself, or do you have a crew who animates and builds the sets, or how do you normally work there?
So when I was inside the Trenka studio, we had a fantastic big crew of 20 professionals. And then we were downsizing into when we were doing this film, this Xenia film in the garage. Let me count. We had a cameraman who was also our producer. We had our animator. We had a painter. We had one handyman. Then we had my Finnish scenographer and me. So we were 6. And it has been between 6 and 10. Of course, we are always having these external artists like the skeleton maker who is doing the armatures in his own little working space. In the old days, everybody were together in Barrandov. We had all the places like the latex. So a hand maker was making the hands with latex material, and the armature maker was creating the metal skeletons in his own working room. But nowadays, these professionals are externals, so they are having their own little spaces, and we are just collecting the things together. And as the costume makers are nowadays also working from their home ateliers, and that's sometimes very time-taking because you have to visit many places when you are collecting the things together. In the Trenka studio, everything was under one roof.
I suppose it makes it more like personal than you collect your own materials, but of course, yeah, it's much harder process. Can you do, because I think your films have a very wonderful scenography, and all of the sets and the materials and the puppet building quality is like very high and very interesting. So is Prague, for instance, working with Czech artists, is that, in your opinion, one of the best places to do that? Would it be possible for you to do a similar work in Finland, for instance, or some other country?
That's a good question, because when I'm, for example, when I am doing my own scenography, I'm always looking this kind of old real materials. And Prague is a heaven when it comes to flea markets and bazaars, and all kind of this kind of antiquities and old prints, and really I'm using a lot of time by buying very old things or just finding old, let's say, rusty metal or rusty barbed wire. And Prague has so fantastic, let's say that you can just go into any backyard and you find some fantastic objects. Finland is over tidy. It's so boring here. I'm still digging in all possible places when I am seeing this kind of roskalava. I'm always taking a look, but Finland is nowadays so wealthy. We don't have interesting scrap here. And in Prague, the possibilities of finding some unbelievable objects, even from the streets, it's still like a cornucopia of things. And
yeah, and do you feel like this kind of tradition of Czech puppet making and like animation, like that, maybe the animation kind of started with someone like Jiří Trenka. Do you feel like that still is kind of continuing, or is that somehow like being or is that continuing well, or is that somehow being paused or interrupted because of the changes, all the social changes that's been happening in there?
I'm extremely happy with my new team. This Last Matador, I was working with animator Michal Kubicek and the cameraman Alan Soural. They are between 35, 39 years old, and they are both coming from the Slin School of Animation. It's in a distant Moravia. It's a very old animation studio and the old school, and it's a bit different than the Prague schools. And the good thing with this Slin School is that the students are still working in relatively small groups. So they are used to do, let's say, many things on the same time. The flexibility is a very important thing when you are working in a small team. And I'm extremely happy that I found now also the younger generation, because my older colleagues are retiring now. When I came to Trenka Studio, I was 25 and my colleagues were 10 years older than I. Those days they were something like 35 and now they are almost 70. So I'm extremely happy that now we have a new generation who is still interested in puppet animation and even developing it into the new direction, but they are still using the old methods and the old ways, but they are masters of the new technology also. And that's very handy because, for example, this post-production process of the Last Matador was very important as we were working under extremely circumstances because of Corona. We had to use more, for example, green screen than we were calculating. And then our cameraman he was having an excellent knowledge of how to take the best of the green screen facilities. And so it was for me a new thing that you can really be so creative even in the post-production phase. I don't know a lot about the programs. The programs are so highly developed nowadays, but I'm really enjoying the possibilities of the tricks. For example, this trick when Putin is vanishing into the space. We were first just shooting Putin against the green screen. And then in the post-production studio, the post-production producer, Jan Turek, said that, okay, we can try something. We can put a dark blue velvet and we can put salt, different kind of sea salt on the glass. We were creating like 2 levels, just putting the fine salt and the bigger sea salt crystals, and they were looking like stars. And then he was able in his programs to move the stars to create this feeling of endless space. And it was a space made of summit and salt. And in a way, that's the magic. In the old days of Jiri Trnka, I always remember when I was solving the problem of a smoke. We had a picture with chimneys. I wanted to have smoke. And I was trying many ways. Those days we were working with the mask, with the 35mm tricks. But then with our very innovative mechanic, we created this spiral. We made a metal spirals. They were just turning around and round, and that created something like optical smoke. So it was the old way, and now this sea salt and summit together with the high developed programs, they were creating a space. So I think that's the magic of animation, when you are using something to create something new. And I like it so much to work with these people, because when you are putting your heads together, you are really creating worlds.
It's amazing to hear like how creative they are, even technically. And of course, if they have this very strong tradition, it's wonderful to hear that that's kind of transferred through the generation, that they are able to include this kind of modern technology and get the same effect, probably with even like a higher like image quality. And that's really wonderful to hear. Also, I'm wondering, because you've made your stories are either based in Finland or in the Czech storytelling tradition. Do you feel like there is a connection between the two storytelling, because you normally write your scripts? So do you feel there is a connection, or do you always try to make them very different if they are based on Finland, or I mean the story is based in Finland or in Czech?
Can you ask the question again?
I'm wondering, because the subjects of your films, they're either based on Finland or Czech storytelling. Like, do you feel like there is a connection between the two storytelling? Are they very similar, or they're very different? Like when you're trying to do a story on Czech Republic, it's in Czechoslovakia, is very different from the Finnish one, or not?
I think that I have somehow created my own way of storytelling. It's neither Czech, neither Finnish. For example, yesterday I was looking the Eurovision contest and I was laughing so much because the Finnish heavy metal is always so nice and dark. It's really dark. I was proud to see yesterday that Finland was really on the dark side. And my stories are also on the dark side. But it's funny because even the Czech tradition has this kind of dark surrealistic tradition of Jan Svankmajer and Jiří Barta. And also some of the Finnish, let's say that Finnish, my maybe the greatest influencer has been Hugo Simberg. I very much feel that he has been influencing my scenography a lot. But he's not so dark. He's more like he's very gentle, like the way how he is portraying the death. It is very gentle. And in many of my films, I have been having these skeletons, the figure of death. And it's somehow between the Finnish, the Simberg-like style, and the Czech death is even more macabre. It can be sometimes more funny. It's really the black humor, but I'm somehow between. Or that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, you're kind of linking the both of them
I
and
think
kind
so.
of taking influences from both of them. Yeah, because that's what I feel about them. That I don't, and I've seen all your films. I kind of don't even think that whether this is based in Finland or Czech Republic. It seems to me like a very similar kind of story. So that's very true.
It may be also the ways how I'm choosing the topics. That may be important.
Yeah, that's true. So like for in your like projects, like generally, like what kind of normally what kind of like is your goal quite often when you take a certain idea is it sort of like to change it into a, because with the Mannerheim I think the story was very different from what people knew from him and heard from him. So is this your how do you normally like approach a story? Like, do you want to interpret it in your own way? Yes.
For example, the new series I'm working just now, I'm collecting old Roma stories, documentary stories about the big immigration years when Roma families were moving from Karelia to Stockholm. And I'm always fascinated by this power of this the big stories. Let's say that it's one of the big stories how almost every Roma family had somebody who moved over to Stockholm. And all the stories and legends around this big immigration movement. I like to observe this kind of magic that's connected to these big historical changes. And I very often I am combining legends and then the real documentary stories. It's also going to happen now. There will be a Roma girl, for example, who is desperately looking a way to get over to Sweden. The other members of the family, they went before. She was left behind. First, she's trying to take her horse and sledge to the Viking Line boat in vain. She's not allowed to enter to the boat with the horse. So she decided to go to the winter road over the icy sea to Stockholm, and she falls down, almost dying. But then a miracle is happening. A U-boat is coming and rescuing her, and it's a Roma U-boat from Karelia. Okay, a bit like of the Kusturica style music. A Roma U-boat is coming with horns, looking like a fish. And so I'm like combining this, because in the Roma oral heritage, we always have this storytelling with humor, but also combining the historical facts. And so I think that's the best of the old folkloristic material, that you will always have these anarchistic ways of how to feel the reality. And because the aim of the series is also to tell stories about the real Roma history in Finland, not only how the Romas were immigrating to Stockholm, but how the Romas came to Finland and what are the roots of the Roma community in Finland. So inside the Roma U-boat, you will find a library of Roma knowledge.
Oh, sounds fascinating. Yeah, it's quite interesting that so this is going to be your next project. And
Yes.
do you know, when are you starting to animate and actually animate and building the sets? Are you going to do it in Finland, or where you are? Do you know where you're going to shoot it yet?
I'm going to do the preparations in Finland. And very important is to work with the local Roma musicians here. So first we are going to record the music. And so when the music is ready, then I'm moving over back to Prague. I hope the pandemic will be over by then. And then we are first making the demo, hopefully next year. And then when the demo is ready, then we will continue with it. Will be 6 pieces of 10 minutes.
Oh, wow, that long. So yeah, about hour long then altogether. So it's like a series, you could say.
Yes, and we are maybe also going to edit like a long film from that.
Yeah, and is it that's your 20th film, isn't it? And that's why you're making a feature. Okay, yeah, because I heard about it, but I didn't know what it was about. Okay, so you're trying to make it, you're making it into a feature film. And so yeah, wonderful. That's wonderful. So 6 stories to make this feature film. And 6 separate stories, maybe, or are they kind of?
Yeah, they are like a continuing stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds wonderful. So yeah, you like this kind of, so you've had this trilogy, Tampere trilogy, and then the Kafka trilogy, and then this is going to be like a 6 continuing stories. Like
I made years ago 6 Roma films around the millennium. So they were like the historical stories how Romas came to Europe. It was a collection of 6 stories from 6 different countries, also with different Roma musicians from 8 countries altogether. So this project is like a continuing of the first series. And then I have one more lifetime project. It's the Bulgakov thing, the Master and Margarita. We have been preparing that film for a really long time. I have already made a demo, but as the war between Russia and Ukraine started, we got into political problems because the script is having some very, how can I say, Putin made a censorship law in Russia that no Russian film nor cooperation shall not contain any separatistic material. That's how he said. And my version of Bulgakov is starting with the metro attack in Moscow in 2010. There will be a Chechenian young woman in the other role. It starts with the fiction material. And that was too much. We got orders. We had a Russian co-producer, but he was not able to complete the financiation process because of that metro prologue and epilogue. And we were refusing to take it away because it's a part of the story. So we lost our Russian developers. And then we were also co-producing the plan with Polish studios. And the big Polish studio semaphore collapsed later. But we hope that we are still able to get the project back to the tracks one day. And I hope that Bulgakov will be my next project after the Roma films, if I'm doing the long-term planning.
Oh, sounds quite interesting. So hopefully you find like a fine answer for them, and then maybe, yeah, or maybe you can do it in Barrandov, because I suppose they have a lot of facilities. But I suppose always the finance here is the tricky part. I have another question about like the storytelling traditions. So you already mentioned Roma, and many of your films are based on this Roma storytelling tradition. Is there another one that you prefer and like to make stories about?
Of course, I have made this Tampere trilogy because in Tampere district, especially in the Pispala Hill, we had this very special way of storytelling. I always said that the Pispala was a Finnish Macondo because people had time to tell the stories. They were poor, the houses were small, but the backyards were full of musicians and storytellers from very different origins. It was like we can say that Pispala was like a hotspot of Finland those days. We still had many minorities, many subcultures. And in the 70s, when I was there, it was still very vivid. So I was absolutely fascinated by the ways how the old folks were telling the stories. Even the wartime stories, the very dark and grim stories of the Civil War, they always told with this kind of twist and this kind of crazy, absurd black humor. So I think this storytelling tradition of Pispala, it has also been influencing my works a lot.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there were influences from different places. So were they all just Finns there? Because this is after the...
No, because we had this kind of... Pispala was always a very poor district, so we had a very big Roma community there. You could still find houses for very big Roma families even. We had the Tatar community, the old Tatars that came from Russia before and just after the revolution. And later, of course, we had the young artists, and nowadays Pispala is still a bit multicultural. And this proletarian tradition was also very interesting because we always had these influencers and free thinkers and for example, in the old days when my grandmother was young, Pispala was full of Tolstoyans. Tolstoy was very popular, and even vegetarians already those days, thanks to Tolstoy. So we had Tolstoyans, we had vegetarians, we had pacifists. The spiritual movement was also very popular. We had spiritists in Pispala, believe or not, but these socialists and the spiritists, they walk hand in hand. Characters like Matti Kurikka. So this kind of extremely colorful persons that they were combining socialistic ideals, but also the spiritist methods, really crazy. And then we had these free libraries, the learning circles, and the proletarian theater companies. That's happened when my grandmother was young. And the spirit of that kind of, let's say, alternative thinking and avant-garde thinking, it was still very present when I was young in the 70s. And then we were combining these influences with the rising punk and new wave movement. So we were having our roots in that kind of old school Pispala movements, and then we were adding something new with this.
So this Pispala storytelling tradition that you talk about, did it start already before the Finnish independence? Was it during the Russian period still, or
it was even during the Russian period, because Pispala was a place for cheap housing for the people who were working in the big factories. And it was extremely overpopulated. The flats were so small but every room could accommodate 5, 6, 7 people. It was extremely populated.
Yeah, wonderful. Really wonderful to hear about these traditions. And I think most people don't necessarily know about this. So I'm really glad that you're bringing them to life through your animations. I have to say that as much as I would like to hear more from you and your wonderful films, we're a little bit running out of time. So is there some like final last words that you would like to add and tell our viewers?
Let me think for a while.
Yeah, about your filmmaking generally, or yeah, whatever subjects you prefer.
So yeah, there is one thing. I grow up with the spirit of Jiri Trnka also. And those days when I was a young film student in Prague, the film culture was really, really strong. Always when a new animation came into theaters, like a new feature animation by Jan Svankmajer, like the Faust or the long films, people were really waiting to see the films together. It was a big event. And sharing the experiences to look the film in the cinema, it's one of the things that I have been most missing now during the pandemic. So I really hope that we can go back to the tracks. That I hope that after this year we are still able to rise again, to visit festivals, to visit cinemas, to do it together, and to support our local cinemas and support the festivals, to strengthen this beautiful world of cinematography and animation. And I'm extremely worried when I heard that the Finnish state is now cutting the cultural grants. We will be having many, many hard years now. But I hope that we can stay strong and keep our culture alive and believe in the future and really to be active in the all fields of filmmaking.
True. I hope the same. Yeah, we have the like also I've been like programming and organizing this festival a couple of years, and also we are very worried that although in Finland the numbers are for Corona very low, that they just keep theaters closed for now. It's been 7-8 months, and we're also kind of really worried. And what really like I have the same hopes as you, that it really like seeing a well-made film or an animation in a cinema is completely different experience, and I hope we can get back to it. And also to the community that exists in the animation festivals. That's very wonderful, this kind of interaction that you have in these festivals. I think a lot of people are looking forward to getting back to that, and I'm sure you agree with me, and it's wonderful to hear the same things from you. So thank you so much for your words, and it's wonderful having you, and I wish you best of luck with your upcoming projects, and hopefully yes, please see whatever we have in the festival, and have a nice summer, and thank you so much for everything.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
See you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye. 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 Thank you.